The air in the interrogation room hung thick with cigarette smoke and unspoken tension. Was it possible that one wrong question could unravel the fragile threads of the Allied effort? The faces across the scarred wooden table were a study in controlled anxiety, men hardened by war now wrestling with a dilemma far removed from the battlefield. How could they have been so blind? It was 1944, and the war was a ravenous beast consuming everything in its path. Within the unassuming walls of a makeshift intelligence center in the English countryside, the interrogation of a suspected spy was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. Sergeant Thomas Baker, a man whose youthful face belied the countless horrors he had witnessed, adjusted the lamp, its harsh glare intensifying the starkness of the room. He glanced at his superior, Major Davies, a seasoned officer whose usual composure was today masked by a furrowed brow. Their subject sat opposite them, a woman who had identified herself as Sarah Williams. She was young, perhaps no older than 23, with intelligent eyes that held a mixture of defiance and fear. Sarah Williams had been apprehended near a restricted military zone, carrying documents that on the surface appeared innocuous. But the documents had been encoded. The officers had spent days trying to decipher the code, finally managing to partially break it. What they had deciphered pointed towards a coordinated attack on Allied supply lines. The initial hours of interrogation had yielded little. Sarah maintained her innocence, claiming she was a courier for a local charity and had simply lost her way. But Baker and Davies were not easily swayed. They had seen too much, known too many lies to accept such a simple explanation. Baker leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "Miss Williams, we have reason to believe you are not being entirely truthful with us. These documents you were carrying, they contain information that could endanger countless lives." Sarah met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I told you, Sergeant, I have no idea what you're talking about. I am a volunteer, nothing more." Davies intervened, his voice softer, more conciliatory. "Miss Williams, we understand you may be frightened, but we assure you if you cooperate, things will go much easier for you. Tell us who you're working for." "Who gave you these documents?" Sarah remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. The stalemate continued. Baker and Davies tried different approaches, alternating between gentle persuasion and veiled threats. They presented her with intercepted radio transmissions, maps of known enemy positions, anything they thought might crack her resolve. But Sarah remained steadfast, her story unchanged. Days bled into nights. The interrogation room became a battleground of wills, a silent war waged with words and glances. Baker and Davies grew increasingly frustrated. They were running out of time. The information they believed Sarah possessed was crucial to preventing a potential catastrophe. They decided to take a more aggressive approach, employing techniques they usually reserved for hardened Nazi operatives. They began to mislead her, feeding her false information, hoping to catch her in a lie. "We know about your contact in London," Baker stated, his voice cold. "We know about the meetings, the coded messages. We know everything, Miss Williams. It's time to confess." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent. Baker pressed on, weaving a fabricated tale of betrayal and deceit. He described a network of spies, their identities and methods all concocted to sow seeds of doubt in Sarah's mind. He watched her closely, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that his words were hitting their mark. Davies chimed in, playing the role of the sympathetic interrogator. "Miss Williams, we know you were probably manipulated. These people, they used you. But it's not too late to redeem yourself. Tell us what you know and we can help you." The psychological pressure mounted. Sarah grew more withdrawn, her initial defiance slowly eroding, replaced by a palpable sense of fear. She began to fidget, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Baker and Davies sensed they were getting closer. They intensified their efforts, pushing her harder, feeding her more misinformation. Tightening the noose around her, then came the slip. During a late-night session, exhausted and disoriented, Sarah made a seemingly insignificant remark. In response to another fabricated detail about her supposed contact, she corrected one specific element of the story, revealing a knowledge of the network that she should not have possessed if she were truly innocent. Baker and Davies exchanged a look of triumph. They had her. They pressed her on the inconsistency, demanding an explanation. Sarah panicked, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. She began to stammer, her voice cracking with emotion. Finally, she broke down, admitting that she had been working as a courier, but insisting that she had no idea what the documents contained. She claimed she had been approached by a man who offered her a large sum of money to deliver the packages to a specific location. She had been told that the contents were harmless, simply business papers. She had needed the money, she explained, to support her ailing mother. Baker and Davies listened intently, skeptical but intrigued. They knew that spies often use such stories to conceal their true motives, but something about Sarah's demeanor, the raw emotion in her voice, made them wonder if there might be a grain of truth in her account. They decided to delve deeper into her background, checking her story against available records. They verified her address, her mother's medical condition, the details of her employment history. Everything seemed to check out, but something still nagged at Baker. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Sarah Williams than met the eye. He decided to run a more comprehensive background check, digging into her family history, her social connections, anything that might reveal a hidden motive. The results came back the following morning. Baker stared at the report in disbelief, his heart pounding in his chest. He read the name again and again, each time feeling a surge of disbelief wash over him. He rushed into Davies' office, his face pale. "Sir, you need to see this. There's something you need to know about Sarah Williams." Davies looked up, his expression weary. "What is it, Baker? I haven't slept in 36 hours and I need a strong cup of coffee." Baker handed him the report, his hand trembling slightly. Davies took it, glanced at the document, and then his eyes widened in shock. He read the report carefully, his face growing paler with each line. "This can't be right," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "This has to be a mistake." The report revealed that Sarah Williams was not just any courier. She was not just a volunteer or a naive young woman caught in a web of espionage. Sarah Williams was Sarah Churchill, the daughter of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill. The implications were staggering. The interrogation of a suspected spy had inadvertently turned into the detention of the Prime Minister's daughter. A diplomatic nightmare was unfolding before their eyes. Davies slumped back in his chair, his head in his hands. "How could this happen?" he groaned. "How could we be so blind?" Baker stood in stunned silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He realized the gravity of their mistake. They had been so focused on extracting information, so convinced of Sarah's guilt, that they had failed to see the obvious. Now, they faced a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The interrogation of Sarah Churchill could have far-reaching consequences, jeopardizing the fragile alliance between the Allied nations and potentially undermining the entire war effort. Davies looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We need to inform the Prime Minister immediately," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "This is beyond our control. We need to let him know what has happened, and we need to prepare for the fallout." Baker nodded, his mind racing. He knew that informing Churchill was the right thing to do, but he also knew that it would likely mean the end of their careers. The Prime Minister was not known for his leniency, especially when it came to matters involving his family. As Davies reached for the phone, Baker couldn't help but wonder how Sarah Churchill had become entangled in this web of espionage. Was she truly innocent, as she claimed? Or was she a willing participant in a larger conspiracy? The questions swirled in his mind, unanswered and unsettling. He knew that the truth was out there somewhere, buried beneath layers of deception and intrigue. But finding it would be a dangerous and treacherous undertaking, one that could cost them everything. The phone rang, shattering the silence in the room. Davies picked it up, his hand shaking. "This is Major Davies," he said, his voice strained. "I need to speak to the Prime Minister immediately. It's a matter of utmost urgency." There was a pause, and then a voice on the other end of the line spoke, its tone cold and authoritative. "The Prime Minister is unavailable. He is in a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. You will have to wait." Davies' heart sank. He knew that every minute counted. The longer they waited, the greater the risk of the situation spiraling out of control. Please, he pleaded. This is a matter of national security. It concerns his daughter, Sarah. There was another pause, longer this time. Then the voice on the other end of the line spoke again, its tone even colder than before. I am aware of the situation, Major Davies. The Prime Minister has been informed. He has issued specific instructions. You are to continue the interrogation of Miss Churchill. You are to extract all possible information from her, regardless of the consequences. Do you understand? Davies stared at the phone in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Prime Minister was ordering them to continue interrogating his own daughter, even after learning of her true identity. But sir, Davies stammered, with all due respect, this is madness. We can't continue interrogating the Prime Minister's daughter. It's a diplomatic disaster waiting to happen. The voice on the other end of the line remained impassive. You will follow your orders, Major Davies. The Prime Minister is counting on you. Do not fail him. The line went dead. Davies slowly lowered the phone, his face ashen. He looked at Baker, his eyes filled with a mixture of horror and resignation. We have our orders, he said, his voice barely a whisper. We have to continue the interrogation. Baker stared at him in disbelief. But sir, this is insane. We can't do this. We have to tell anyone that the Prime Minister is ordering us to interrogate his own daughter. Davies shook his head. It's no use, Baker. We're trapped. If we disobey the Prime Minister, we'll be court-martialed or worse. We have no choice. We have to follow orders. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Come on, he said, his voice firmer now. We have a job to do. Let's go see Miss Churchill. Baker followed him out of the office, his mind reeling. He couldn't believe that they were about to continue interrogating the Prime Minister's daughter, knowing that they were acting under his direct orders. He felt like a pawn in a game he didn't understand, a game with stakes far higher than he could ever have imagined. As they walked towards the interrogation room, Baker couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. He sensed that something was terribly wrong, that they were being manipulated by forces far beyond their control. He wondered what the Prime Minister was really up to, and what he hoped to gain by ordering the interrogation of his own daughter. They reached the interrogation room and Davies paused, taking a deep breath before opening the door. He stepped inside, followed by Baker. Sarah Churchill sat at the table, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked up as they entered, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Miss Churchill, Davies said, his voice carefully controlled. We need to ask you a few more questions. Please cooperate with us, and this will all be over soon. Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. What more do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely audible. I've told you everything I know. Davies exchanged a look with Baker, then turned back to Sarah. We know who you are, Miss Churchill, he said, his voice low and deliberate. We know about your family. We know about your father. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. She stared at Davies, her face paling. How did you find out? She stammered. Davies ignored her question. We need to know the truth, Miss Churchill, he said. We need to know why you were carrying those documents. We need to know who you're working for. Sarah remained silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. Davies pressed on, his voice growing more insistent. We know that you're not just a naive young woman caught in a web of espionage, Miss Churchill. We know that you're the Prime Minister's daughter, and we know that you're hiding something. Sarah's composure finally cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she began to sob. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. Please, just let me go. I can't take any more of this. Davies remained unmoved. We can't let you go, Miss Churchill, he said, his voice cold. Not until we know the truth. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Tell us everything, Miss Churchill, he said. Tell us everything, or we'll have to take more drastic measures. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with terror. She knew that she was trapped, that there was no escape. She knew that Davies and Baker would stop at nothing to get the information they wanted. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. All right, she said, her voice trembling. I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise me that you'll let me go afterwards. Davies hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We promise, he said. Just tell us the truth. Sarah began to speak, her voice low and halting. She told them about the man who had approached her, the man who had offered her money to deliver the documents. She told them about the coded messages, the secret meetings, the sense of danger that had surrounded her. She told them everything she knew, everything she could remember. And as she spoke, Davies and Baker listened intently, their faces growing more grim with each passing word. Finally, she finished her story, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at Davies, her eyes pleading. "Please," she said. "You promised. You have to let me go." Davies looked at her, his expression unreadable. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said. "We'll let you go, but first we need to ask you one more question." Sarah's heart sank. She knew that something was wrong. She could feel it in her bones. What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. Davies leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Who is your contact in the resistance?" he asked. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "I don't have any contact in the resistance." Davies smiled, a chilling smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "Don't lie to us, Miss Churchill," he said. "We know that you're working with the resistance. We know that you're helping them to sabotage the war effort." Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. "No," she cried. "It's not true. I swear I don't know anything about the resistance." Davies ignored her protests. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. He held it up for Sarah to see. "Do you recognize this man, Miss Churchill?" he asked. Sarah looked at the photograph, her heart pounding in her chest. The man in the photograph was someone she knew, someone she trusted. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room burst open. A figure strode in, silhouetted against the light. It was a woman dressed in a sharp military uniform, her face grim and determined. "That's enough," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "The interrogation is over." Davies and Baker turned to face her, their expressions a mixture of surprise and defiance. "Who are you?" Davies demanded. "And what do you think you're doing?" The woman stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Davies. "I am Colonel Davies," she said, "and I am here to take charge of this situation." She turned to Sarah, her expression softening. "Miss Churchill," she said, "you are safe now. We're going to get you out of here." Sarah looked at the colonel, her eyes filled with hope. "Who are you?" she asked. "Are you with the resistance?" The colonel smiled, a warm and reassuring smile. "You could say that," she said. "Now come with me, we don't have much time." She reached out her hand to Sarah, and Sarah took it, her fingers gripping tightly. Together they turned and walked towards the door, leaving Davies and Baker standing in stunned silence. But as they reached the doorway, the colonel paused, turning back to face Davies and Baker. "Oh, and one more thing," she said, her voice cold and hard. "You might want to check the signature on your orders. I think you'll find that they're not quite what they seem." She smiled again, a chilling smile that sent a shiver down Davies and Baker's spines. Then she turned and walked out of the room, leading Sarah Churchill into the unknown. The photo left behind revealed the man to be Winston Churchill, but the signature on the orders, they belonged to someone thought to be dead for over 2 years, Rudolf Hess. What did it all mean?